You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it as promised. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and we are doing Mailbag ×2 this week. This is our second one of the week, so let's get into it. Starting with our leaders and best, James Crudup at James Crudup 6. Any behind-the-scenes intel that you have received that absolutely shocked you are old enough to now share? Not particularly, because I don't really remember. I saw this when it came in, and I just remember sitting there thinking, like, I don't have anything that's, number one, that's shocking. All right, so here's a couple things that I can remember. So there was something kind of a defensive coach mutiny happening with Don Brown to some degree because of his reluctance to change. And a lot of guys felt like they were, I'm not going to get into the details, but they felt like they were setting their careers back due to what was happening in the Ohio State game in particular. I do know that the coaches were hoping what was going to happen in the Alabama game was that Michigan was going to win an offensive shootout and that the defense was going to get shredded, went the other way for the most part. So that's one thing. I don't know if there's anything that's like particularly shocking. I mean, that was kind of the biggest one, I think. But I can't think of anything that's like particularly crazy. I'm trying to think in recruiting if there was anything that was really something that, I mean, Michigan was fully convinced for a very long time that Najee Harris was coming. Very well convinced. I have more to that, but not firsthand, so I'm not going to share that. Trying to think if there was anything else. That's all I really got. I don't think there's, like, usually things are really kind of what they are, you know? Then nothing's ever really shocking. I mean, I remember in the recruitments of Isaiah Wilson and Otis Reese, Michigan was like, I asked them like the day before signing day or before the commitments. And well, with Otis Reese, it was, yeah, he's coming, he's good. And then the day of, it was like, he gone. With Isaiah Wilson, I remember it being like, oh, he's definitely ours, to like about 3 days beforehand being like, yeah, he's not coming. By the way, I love at the beginning of every podcast, if you listen closely, you can hear Zuri making a ruckus in the background. She gets very confused when I start doing the podcast. Josh Barr at Jadiki. Joel Klatt went off on the usefulness of the NCAA for obvious reasons, coming after Michigan for silly crap while doing nothing to regulate NIL, where all the real problems are. Should the major conferences band together and tell the NCAA to take a hike? Here's the problem, is that I don't think that they're necessarily going to, for the sake of, I feel like there's a lot of schools in the major conferences that benefit from the status quo. But as we're learning, anyone can be the subject of anything, you know? So I do think that they essentially should. They don't need the NCAA. They don't. The major conferences, at least. So I think that that would be a wise thing. And then they could come up with the major conferences, at least maybe the 10 conferences could come up with like, here's our ground rules. We're going to adhere to this. And we're going to appoint whoever to oversee it. But I don't know. I don't think that they will. It's just kind of is what it is. My brother in metal, Michael Wolf at MWolf21. What's your current go-to / favorite cigar? I haven't had many cigars lately. I think the last time I smoked was the day before the Big Ten championship game. I had a blackened, the Drew Estate Metallica cigar. It was very, very good. I know you asked me about that off air at one point. My favorite generally, though, like when I do treat myself, is Foundation Tabernacle Sun Grown. That's the one that I tend to go to. I like anything from Foundation, anything from Caldwell. Long Live the King and the King is Dead are really good. Those would probably be the ones I'd go to. Liga Privada would probably be the other one. Which wide receivers do you see starting? I think it would be Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson. If you're adding a third, I'll throw Darius Clemens into the mix there. But I could see it being Tyler Morris. He probably is more of a fit for what they would need. Darius Clemens is probably going to back up Cornelius, I'm going to assume. What wide receiver combination do you think creates interesting matchups for defenses? I mean, technically, any could, if they all just kind of do what they're capable of. I don't think that there's one in particular. I don't think it's like you get these two guys out on the field. It's not like the running back situation. But I'm curious to see what Carmelo English does if he's able to be an early contributor. I think he has that possibility. But then again, I thought that of the three guys this past year. I'm curious to see what happens when you get those new three guys out on the field at the same time now that they've got a year under their belt. KRTF Farmer 84, since Jimmy Whitner did not go this week, do you think we'll try to get Davis Warren meaningful snaps as QB2 this year? I hope so, because, I mean, if you don't get, or if you get the commitment, say, of a Jaden Davis, I don't think they're necessarily going to get Dylan Raiola, but if you don't get one of those guys that you really want, you might need him. Though I do not necessarily think it's a foregone conclusion that J.J. McCarthy is off to the NFL after this year. I think that's just what we think. He's just the kind of guy that would come back for a fourth year. Like, no matter what. He just kind of has that type of mentality, I think. He does not seem like I'm out of here as soon as I get a chance. He just does not strike me as that type of guy. So, yeah. I think that it would be wise. It would be prudent. And I think that they will. Jonathan Joseph at JJoseph2156. Who's your pick for the 4 or 5 captains next season? Well, Sainer still, I obviously think will retain his role as a captain. Staying on the defensive side, let's see. RJ Moten has been a guy that I've long said, and I could see Chris Jenkins rising into that role. On offense, I think it will be Blake Corum. And as much as I want to say J.J. McCarthy, and it very, very well could be, maybe should be, I could see a guy like Trevor Keegan getting that nod. I think it's good to have an offensive lineman being your captain as well. All right, that's going to do it for segment 1. We are going to move on and do more here in just a moment. Before we do that, the NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number 1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, join today to get started with $150 in free bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorites bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine. I want to say combine. I don't know what it is about it. Combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I think that's the quickest we breezed through the leaders and best. Let's get to the victors valiant. Jim at Jim in the North. How do you think the defense looks next year with the loss of talent, but year 2 of Minter? I don't think yes, they did lose some talent. I don't necessarily know. The Mozzie Smith loss might be more impactful than we're maybe giving credit for, but we've seen the defense thrive even when he's not out on the field. Losing the corners could be rough, but Will Johnson ended up grading out as one of the top cornerbacks in the country according to PFF in a graphic they released yesterday. So that's good. And then we'll get to the corners and everything more. But, I mean, you really, for the most part, have the band getting back together. And I think that now it's really year 3 of the defense, but year 2 of Minter. This could be a year where it really just takes off, where you don't see some of the breaking that we saw kind of later in the year when they played at more high-powered offenses. I think this could be a situation where this defense starts to look more like 2016 or 2018 Don Brown, where it's just like, good luck. You're not going to be able to get much of anything. Now, that said, I mean, this is more of a bend, don't break in a lot of ways, so it's not going to be necessarily quite as dominant, but I think you could see it being a situation where it is a lot more feared. What do you think about Greasy? I think he's doing a great job in San Francisco. I just don't really necessarily think like you have to, get a guy who wants to recruit. That's just the nature of college football now. Doesn't all have to be that, but I think that's probably the intention. He's never done any recruiting. He's had the bad blood with Jim Harbaugh from him saying that he should be fired. Not that that can't be overcome or mended or whatever. But my interaction with Greasy, personally, I've only had one and wasn't exactly of the most pleasant variety. He just does not seem like the type of guy that's going to just be like, yeah, okay. Just not really the thing. He would be down my list of choices of candidates. Let's see. My good friend Chris Ballas from thewolverine.com asked me, after he doxed me on their site, where did the nickname Black Gandhi come from? That's my handle over there, as well as MGoBlog. So I came up with that when I was like 20, 21. And I use it as my semi-incognito name here and there. Still, very rarely. It's very rarely, usually my, not very often my username for things, but in those kind of more public things like that, that's what I go with. It came from just, thought I was so clever when I was like 20 years old, being like, I'm like Gandhi. I'm wise like Gandhi, but I'm black. So it's just that simple. I thought that was so clever and cool. Plus, I just like the name of it. So that's what it was. My skin color, kind of. Half of my skin color mixed with the idea that I was wise like Gandhi. Shane at Seamus0914 with the return of Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson. You see AJ Henning as wide receiver 3 or one of the sophomores. They hyped Henning last offseason and barely used him. And when they did, it was obvious. I mean, I would hope so, but I got to be more consistent with it. I mean, they didn't break out the jet sweep for like 13, was it? Since week 3. Then they finally break it out I think they only used it once all season, and then they break it out against TCU. What else did you think was going to happen? I would think that'd be great for him, for Michigan, if it was him, not Tyler Morris. He's got an incredible athleticism, as we've seen, his ability on returns when he actually does return it. So I hope so. But I after last year, because I had him as my offensive player of the year, I believe, preseason, not willing to go down that road again. Mark Zimke. How important is it for JJ McCarthy to have a breakout year to ensure he's a high draft pick? And what do you think would happen if he had similar numbers to 2022? I do think that an NFL team will salivate regardless, but like I said, I don't think that he's necessarily a shoo-in to leave for the NFL. I think it would be really good for the team if he, upped his game, obviously. But I think it all depends. I mean, it's going to be hard to necessarily say, hey, throw for X amount when you've got Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. But I think it's one of those things where one hand feeds the other or scratches the other. I don't know. I'm mixing idioms here, but I think that there's a lot that you can do with JJ. Ultimately, I want to see him use his legs a little bit more, though, too. So I guess I don't have the best answer because I don't necessarily think he's for sure going to the NFL after this year, regardless. Kyle B at KB Go Blue. Who do you have as the starting secondary? Better, same, or worse than last year? Right now, I think that you've got to do the whole secondary. I mean, you still have the 3 rotating safeties with your starters being Makari Page and Rod Moore, with RJ Moten as a kind of swing guy who can also move up to linebacker if necessary. Then I think in the back end, you've got Will Johnson at the moment because there's not another option. I would go with Jaden McBurrows, but we know we didn't see him last year, and that makes you kind of forget about a guy, but he's a guy that I long thought was going to end up being a really good corner here. So that's not surprising. But if they could go and get another guy and kind of wait for him to develop after an unhealthy year last year. I think it will end up being, and Mike Sainer still as the nickel. I think it'll be better because I think you've got guys who are now more acclimated to playing like Macari, full year starting for Rod Moore. And then, a year and plus under your belt if you're Will Johnson. I think it's going to end up being better. I didn't think the secondary was like crazy amazing last year. I think it will be probably this year. Spencer Whitmore at Spencer Whitmore. Thoughts on Doug McDaniel calling out the fan base? My thoughts are, if you're going to do that, you've got to back it up on the court. I think it's fine. I think it's just a kid that's, when he sees all the negative attention coming at him all of a sudden, it's a natural reaction. Honestly, I do the same thing in the podcast comments every now and again on YouTube. People get all upset because I'm wearing like some kind of like, I'm guessing that a lot of the people that comment are people who are like longtime watchers of the show, listeners to the show. But when you're listening, you're not seeing what I'm wearing. But, when I'm wearing a Georgia shirt or whatever, it's like for the last year plus, I've worn different college shirts from home field pretty regularly. And it seems like you get someone who gets super upset. When I wore the Georgia shirt the other day, multiple people got really upset. And yeah, I feel the need to say something about it. Right. So I think that's kind of in the same line, it's a difficult proposition when you're on the other end of it. It's easy to sit there and say, like, yeah, I better back it up on the court. But when you are being personally attacked in one way or the other, it's hard not to speak up, So I'm absolutely fine with it. Plus, I don't think that he's a freshman who's been cast into a very difficult position. And I think he's doing a pretty good job with it, like I discussed yesterday. So it's just I think that people need to chill a little bit when they do get all like that. James Kovalevsky at Coach_Kovo saw Michigan is removing 48 seats and relocating those season ticket holders to widen the tunnel. Do you think that makes much of an impact in preventing confrontations? No, I don't. Not at all. But I think it will be something that will quiet a lot of people for a minute. No, I don't think it's going to make any kind of a difference because, like, the tunnel incidences didn't happen down at the base of the tunnel where the seats are. They happened in the midway point-ish, up, but closer up towards the top and up at the top. They haven't happened down at the base of the tunnel. So it's just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a flesh wound, even though that's not really even a flesh wound. On a made up, someone who used theatrical makeup to make a flesh wound and putting a Band-Aid over that, essentially. Jacob Chavaria at Chavaria. Considering how much Michigan runs the ball and Blake and Donovan likely going to the draft next year, will Michigan get a top 3 running back 5-star recruit? Who do you have your eyes on? I don't know. In 2024, I would forget. I forget as quickly as the names come in. But I know they're targeting him, and I think it'd be stupid for someone not to. We talked about that a lot with Jeremiah Love. I don't know if it'll be a 5-star, but it should be. If you're a high-end running back, why wouldn't you want to play for this team? The philosophy is it's going to really make you look good. I think the only difference is that makes it more difficult is Michigan hasn't had a high-end running back draft pick in a long time. The last 2 went in the 6th round, or around there at least. Anton Sesmita Mangala at Sesmita Mangala. Once the playoff expands, how much will we want other teams of the Big Ten, the ones that don't end with state, to be competitive to the point that we may face them in the title game? I think that would be obviously great. The Big Ten gets a reputation of being one of the best in the country, the second best conference in the country. So yeah, it would be really good to have that. Where when you play in Illinois, that it means something. And I know it did last year, but it's funny that it didn't really get that type of street cred. Number 2, when divisions go away, I'm sure we'll have some rematches of the game for the Big Ten title. Overall, though, won't the conference be better if more teams are competitive? Absolutely. I mean, that's why the SEC, it's people say like, you know, whoa, Georgia. But like, honestly, like playing Kentucky and South Carolina and I know Tennessee was good this year, but I mean, Florida, like playing out of the East is not SEC East. That's not like some kind of murderer's row. You know, they did have to play LSU. The West is the side that's the murderer's row. Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, sometimes Auburn, Texas A&M sometimes. That's the murderer's row. The East is really Georgia and lately maybe pick another one. Maybe. Tennessee this year. Sometimes it's Florida. How different is that than the Big 12 in a lot of ways? All right, finishing us out in segment 2, Perry Mitchell, at Perry Mitchell 08. Trevor Keegan said on the End of the Trenches podcast that he doesn't like Thanksgiving food. Does that make him less trustworthy than Patrick Barron at Blue Baron Photo? I regret to inform you that no one can be more untrustworthy than Patrick Barron. He's the most trustworthy person out there. Even Sarah said it when she met him. She said it first as a joke, and then he told us we were in there was the rain delay. And Patrick came and whispered, and he's like, Cade and JJ are playing catch in the tunnel as to not gather a bunch of attention. We go out there, you know, try to do it covertly, but everyone kind of catches wind. We go out there to grab some pictures, and it's Cade and Davis Warren. And Sarah says to me, you know, he's not really that trustworthy, is he? Anyway, we are going to continue on here momentarily in just a moment. I forgot to say about Patrick Barron, happy birthday, Patrick. It's his birthday today, according to Facebook. All right, we've got the rest, the best of the rest. We're going to breeze through these. Hi, I'm Brad at BradWiss24. Who's your QB coach if you're doing the hiring? If I was doing the hiring, I would throw the book at Joe Brady. And I know that he wouldn't necessarily come, but that would be who I would really go after the hardest. Love what he did at LSU. You've got a similar talent, I think, in JJ McCarthy. I would go all out for him to be your quarterback's coach, pass game coordinator. More realistically, T. Martin is my choice. Clark at Blue Life 8. I see Luke Hamilton trying to be that extra recruiter for this upcoming 2024 class. Do you think an offensive lineman can be as effective as a quarterback in doing so? Maybe. I don't think it necessarily has to be a quarterback, but it does help when it is a quarterback. Shane Morris obviously did a good job. JJ did a good job. But I just think it has to be someone passionate, personable, that makes and is good enough where other people want to play with them. But quarterback is why that tends to help. Skill position players in general. But a heady person like a offensive lineman, that could be good as well. Dave Mays at Dave Mays. Will they have one play caller next year? I don't know. We'll see. We don't know who's the other person yet. Philly at I Am Philly. Why didn't Darius Clemens get more playing time? I'm guessing just because he wasn't ready yet, and probably a lot of it had to do with the blocking piece. And that takes a lot of time for a young guy to get to that point. But we'll see. PK at PK Thoma. Will you dance when RRR is performed in the Oscars? I would, but I'm not going to watch the Oscars because I love RRR. It's such a fun movie. If you haven't watched it, set aside your 4 hours and watch it on Netflix. It is so much fun. I still haven't watched the English dub version, which kind of exciting that they did one. Don at Don MTU83, Michigan over-under next year, 11.5. I predicted them to go 12-0. So for the regular season, so I'm going to go with the over. George Paul Lewis at G13 Lewis. Will JJ throw for more than 3,000 yards? I hope so. I mean, that's not a huge benchmark to hit. That's, 280-ish or 270-ish yards a game in a 12-game season, let alone 13, 14, 15 games. I've been predicting for the longest time that someone would break John Navarre's record. No longer I'm going to do that. The record is just single season for Michigan is just 3,331 yards. So I hope so. Brett Byer 6. Are you on the pulse at all of what's going on with Nicholas Harbor? You feel like Michigan has the best chance of landing him with Oregon now in the hunt. Have you heard anything about how Harbaugh's visit went with him? Only secondhand, and actually probably more like third hand. just kind of following along at like on 3 and all of that. I will say it doesn't look like it's trending well right now. Oregon seems to be very much with the NIL and especially with their embarrassing. Well, no, did they have the embarrassing? Yeah, they had one of the embarrassing early signing days. I think they're going to go all out to get him. And I think that with the track piece, that was going to probably put him over the top. Grand larceny at Keith Larson 49. Oh, Michigan put Corum and Edwards in the backfield at the same time. I hope so. I've been advocating for that constantly. Jimmy B. Awesome at Jimmy B. Awesome 1. If Jim Harbaugh gets a 1 to 3 game suspension, does he take it, let Sharon Moore take the reins as a tryout as head coach? That's another thing I hope. If he does get that he gets his Ryan Day-esque opportunity to see what he can do. Obviously, you hope it's kind of like it was then when they did it in the early season. Granted, they had a tough game against TCU, but he pulled it out. But you'd hope that he would get it in like a non-conference like now, that it isn't pushed back to like next year, and if they do end up having to play at Texas. But even then, Sharon Moore played at Oklahoma. He'll have all the pent-up rage against Texas if he does have that situation. Finishing us out, Brendan at Brendan_good23. Does Jim Harbaugh officially leave Michigan when JJ leaves for the draft? I don't believe so. I know no man knows what the future holds, but I don't believe so. I think that he's going to be around. It's just my own personal feeling. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week. We'll talk to you then. Peace.